This is lesson 6 of Node.js, and here in this lesson we are going to learn how to save individual files. We are going to add the fs module to our application to look for HTML files in our views folder. Then we're going to extend that functionality to our application assets, so things like images, and then we are going to also show how to apply our routing system to its own module and selectively register root from our main application file. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, as you can see here, we've just initialized all of these, the port, we've imported HTTP using require, HTTP status, and then fs, like I said, and we also have this route map object here, which is it's just setting up a route mapping for our HTML files. So the first thing that I want to show is the HTML file itself. It's under views, index.html. There it is. It's a simple HTML file. It just has a title of home page and the body says welcome. So if I go back to my main.js, I use the create server method to create our server object, and then inside of it has this callback function here, and we can use the write head method to check the HTTP status and make sure it delivers the right content type. And then we are going to read the content of the map file that we've set up, right? So we're gonna use an if else statement. We're gonna say if the route map, if route map, right, and then we have the request, the URL of the request. If that evaluates to true, we are going to use our fs module to particularly the read file method to check our route map request URL once again, and we're gonna use a callback function again that takes the parameter error and data, and what it's going to do is that it's going to use the write method to just put that data onto our web page. It's going to respond with the contents of that file. In this case it's index.html, or if there's an error it's just going to throw an error, and we're just going to end that whole response. Or else, if this does not evaluate to true, we're just going to end our response immediately and provide this HTML here saying sorry, it's not found. So what that looks like on our browser, I may just run the server, and if I go to our localhost 3000 and I just go to the default route, right, as you can see it's showing our index.html. But if I try to add something else to try and access a route that doesn't exist, for example, let me say contact, as you can see it says sorry not found, it responds with this here, the else statement is triggered. So what we just did is this listing here, listing 6.2, which is using the fs module in several responses in main.js. This code is quite similar to the code that I just showed. We'll now be moving to this listing 6.3, which will be dealing with using our fs module and routing to dynamically read and save files in main.js. So I'm actually supposed to leave this uncommented. Once again, we have our variables here. We are importing whatever we need to import, all the modules we need to import, and we are declaring our port that we're going to use to listen for requests. And first thing we do is we create this getView URL function, right? And it takes a URL as a parameter, and this is just a formatted string, right? It's going to say views, and then it's going to, this is just a placeholder for what you're gonna put into the URL bar, and then it's just gonna concatenate .html. So what that means is that here I put slash contact, so slash contact is what is going to replace it here, right? But then I could put, I don't know, maybe like slash id or slash index, whatever I put, that's what's going to be placed in here, and then it's just going to return that view, right? That's why the name of the function is getView URL. And then once again we use our HTTP module to run the create server method and create our server object, which will be listening for requests. and we'll provide a response. We create a variable called view URL, and we run our get view URL function, and we take the request to the server, right? So when I refresh, for example, that's going to send a get request to our server, and we take the URL of that request, what I explained, that slash contacts or slash whatever, and we're going to use our fs module to read and use the read file method, right? And it's taking these three, it's taking this view URL parameter and also this other parameter that is a callback function, which has parameters of its own, error and data, similar to what we had. So if it returns an error, we are going to use our write head method to our response and just say this HTTP status code 404, basically just say like it wasn't found, and we're gonna write onto our web page with this HTML file not found. Or else if we don't get an error, we actually get some data, we are going to use the write head method to respond with the status, the HTTP status of 200, which means everything is okay, and we're just going to ensure the content type is HTML, and we're going to write that data onto our web page, and we are going to just end that whole response. So let me just go back. Okay, I actually have to run the server again, and the server is now listening. Yeah, I'm just going to have index dot, actually I just need to say index because it's just gonna put index here. The .html is already there for us, and then I'm just gonna click this. As you can see, it's showing our index.html, but then if I try to give it something that doesn't exist, like for instance I'm just gonna give it contacts again, that doesn't exist, it's gonna say file not found. Okay, so that was listing 6.3. And now I'm just going to move on to the next one, where we are going to create a web server with specific routes for each file in our project. So if I just show you the folders and the files that we have a CSS file with the name test.css, we have an image here, test.png, we have a JS file called test.js, we have our views, our index.html, but we're going to be using these test files here, and we are going to use specific routes for each of these files in our project that are in our project, and we're just going to show them on our browser. So if I just go to the code, the first thing that we do, we create this send error response function. It takes response as a parameter, and once again it's using a response.writeHead method with the HTTP status of not found, basically 404, and it's just going to make sure that the content type is text or HTML, and it's just going to write to our web page that the file is not found, similar to what we had before. After that, once again, we're going to use the create server method to create our server object, use a callback function, taking requests and responses parameters, create a URL parameter, a URL variable, which is just the URL of the request. So whatever request you send, the URL of it will be stored in this variable here. And then if the URL that we have, right, if the index of HTML exists, is not -1, so that means if it exists, we are going to use writeHead method to respond with the status of 200 OK. Make sure the content type is HTML, and then we're gonna run our custom read file function, which is declared here, right? And it takes file path as a parameter, it takes response, it checks if uses the fs module, right? The exists sync, the synchronous blocking, basically method here to check the file path, to check if the file path exists, and then it's just gonna read that file. If it's an error, it's gonna send the error response. It's gonna send an error response. It's gonna run the send error response function, and it's just going to return and write the data, or else it's just going to send the error, right? So that's what we're going to call here. That's what we're going to call here, our custom read file. And we're going to basically just use this formatted string again, this template string, to put whatever value we put here, right? So it's gonna look for that file under views firstly to check if that file exists under views, and it's gonna provide a response. Else, if the index of JS is not equal, that means if a JS file exists, we're going to make sure the content type is text / JavaScript, and then we're going to look for it in the public directory. We're going to look, this is just the file path we're going to follow, /public /js, then / whatever we gave in the URL, right? And then we're going to provide the appropriate response using the custom read file function. We're going to check also for CSS. If the index of CSS is not -1, if it exists, we are going to make sure the content type is CSS, and then we're just going to go through this file path here to go and open that and give the proper response. Same thing with PNG, it's just the same thing over and over again, right? And all of this is listening on port 3000. So the server is already running. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show all of this, right? So we're gonna first start with the error response. So as soon as I just go to my localhost 3000, right? Just go to the port that's listening. You see, by default, we just get this file not found error response, right? That's just what we get by default. But then once we start sending specific requests to this, why is it saying /contact? Yes, but once we start sending specific requests with a certain URL, we are going to start gaining access into our test files here. So the first one that I'm going to try and open is test.css. So I'm just gonna say /test.css here, and as you can see, it just shows us in text the file that we have here, the CSS file. And the next one that we're gonna try and view is our image here, test.png, shows us this image here. And then we're gonna try and view the JavaScript, right? So it's gonna be test.js, shows us this alert here. It's not actually running the code, it's just showing us the code. And yeah, that is all for 6.4. So moving on to the next listing. Okay, so with the next listing that we have here, it concerns our router.js file. More specifically, as you can see right here, we have we first import the HTTP status codes, right, using the require method, and then we create this function right here, HTML content type, right? It's actually not a function, it's objects that we actually don't even export it, and then we create another one called routes, right? We just create these because we are trying to use them in the function that we are going to export, right? So we just define these root objects, and these are just going to store the routes that are mapped to our post and get requests, and then we're going to create a function called handle to process all those root callback functions, right? And then we export that, and now it's available globally, right? We can access it in our other modules. And the other thing that we do also is we build get and post functions so that we can register routes from our main.js. And moving on to the last thing that I want to address is this listing 6.6, where we are actually handling and managing our routes in main.js. And as you can see, we have these variables here, right? It's still the same ones, but now we have this plain context type, right, to provide functionality for presenting plain text and also HTML as we have done before. We're gonna create a custom read file function that's going to reduce our code repetition, and this is just going to read the file, and if there's an error, it's going to log to our console error reading the file, or else it's just gonna respond with the data within that file, right? And then the other one is just going to register routes with get and post. And as you can see here, we're just gonna use the get handler here for our default route here. We have a callback function taking request and response, and it's just gonna it's gonna respond with the plain text index, right? So if I run my server, and then I just go to the default routes, right? So I just go to localhost 3000, and and you see it just shows me the index in plain text. But then if I send a get request to slash index dot html, it shows us our index.html, right? And then if I try and send a post request to this route right here, the default route, what it's going to do is that it's going to say posted, right? It's going to say, it's going to respond with posted. So I'm going to show that last, but we're gonna handle all our requests through router.js. And as you can see, we create a server called importing a router and handles this node port 3000. So just to show the post request here, we have to use the curl command for that. So yeah, that is it basically. When we send a post request, we actually do get this posted message here. And yeah, that is all for lesson 6. I was lucky and I was the driver, and Boitumelo today was my navigator. Thank you.